Cache-Maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome back for the 69th edition of the GeoGearHeads. Tonight, we're featuring another geocacher with some amazing cache hides. I'm the bad cop with Daryl W4, and we have a few items, including listener feedback to hit before we bring 13hache, our special guest this evening.
Yeah, first I have the unpleasant task of asking you to help financially support this show. Despite some great contributions over 2012, we ended up about $500 short of breaking even on the show for the year. We're up for the renewal of our podcast hosting for the year and would appreciate your contributions to help offset that one and our largest expense. Both the Bad Cop and I enjoy bringing you these shows, but the expenses keep mounting and we really could use your help to keep these shows coming. If you can afford to drop us a few bucks through PayPal, we'd really appreciate that. There's a link on the left side of the Cache-Maniacs site to send us those donations. We'll also be happy to take checks as donations for those of you who would rather not use PayPal. And the P.O. Box is on the Cache-Maniacs site, but it's probably best to just drop me an email at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, and we'll get that all set up and email you the details. We really appreciate your support of the show, whether financial, spreading the word to your friends, or even just subscribing and checking out the show each week.
Without a doubt. Thank you so much for all those that listen. Now, we have some great shows in the next coming weeks. Next, the developer of our favorite iOS caching app is coming to share some tricks and tips for Geosphere 3. Then we have Clay Jar on the following week to talk about scuba caching. That's episode 71. Then, for episode 72 on May 9th, we will be talking about geocaching streaks. We'd love your input for any of these shows, and you can send that to us at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, as we've already mentioned, but we'd love to hear those in your own voice. You can record and email them to us, or call into our voice line at 206-350-3647.
And each of the GeoGearhead shows are recorded live through Google Plus Hangout on Air on Thursday nights about 9:10 p.m. Eastern, 6:10 p.m. Pacific. If you're on Google Plus, just circle the GeoGearheads and you should see those hang-ups appear in your stream once they go live. You can also watch through YouTube, and we set up some limited time posts on the Cache-Maniacs site with that video. And those links go out to Facebook and Twitter, so you can watch for those on the Facebook page or on our Twitter feed for that link. If you're submitting feedback for a specific show, please try to get that at least a day ahead of time so we can add it into our rundown correctly. Of course, we're always thrilled to get feedback from previous shows as well, and we have a couple of those tonight.
Most certainly we do. We got an email from JR of JR and Juju. Says, I was catching up on past episodes when I heard someone explain where I go, and to paraphrase, an outdated system. He goes on, I have to disagree. It has many things going for it. First of all, it works on iOS and Android equally. These days, a program built for one system and does not work or operates poorly on the other one. So he's right there. Number two, it has 4 programs to write cartridges, 2 online and 2 downloadable. The Groundspeak program still works, and there are also downloadable templates available. Number 3, I agree it does not have video, but it can play a sound. One complaint is that it's not network connected. And he goes on for number 5. One plus is that it's not network connected. Living in southeastern New Mexico, where network access is limited or unavailable, not requiring a connection or being self-contained is a plus. Now, you can do Where I Go cartridges on tablets that do not have a network capability. This gives people with less expensive tablets access. I've not attempted Ingress here because of the limited bandwidth. There we go. He goes on to say, when we were planning a trip down to Denver, are planning a trip to the Denver area where we were able to download all of the regional Where I Goes. We didn't have to worry if we had network access. There are many Play Anywhere cartridges available. Anyone can go to a park or an open area, even if you have a big enough backyard, and have your own adventure. It's a great way to get the kids to get up off the sofa and get outside. We are only limited by our imagination. How about a driving tour of virtual caches in a town and requiring the player to pick up the correct answer to open up the next zone? At the end, they would get the coordinates to the geocache to sign the log. How about a tour of a zoo or a historical area like Gettysburg? I'll get off my soapbox. I really enjoy the show and have recommended your podcast to other cachers. I've recommended podcasts to non-cachers on batteries, power bags, and wet device recovery.
Well, thank you very much for those recommendations, and we appreciate all your feedback. And this is one we really would have liked to include it on a randomized show to kind of get into it a little bit more. So we may do that later, but since we actually have a guest and a great topic tonight, we'll push that off to hopefully talk about on the next randomized edition. Next on the list, though, we have feedback from the Puffin who emailed in podcast GeoGearHeads 68, Your Gear 1. You talk about transferring files from iPad to a GPSR. You can load microSD via this gadget, and you link to dx.com camera adapter kit. A microSD to SD adapter, and you're ready to go for just a few dollars. Maybe you can use it. Thanks for the nice podcast. Now, I was really interested when we got that email, so I wrote back to him because the camera connection kit does not allow for write access without jailbreaking, and he replied, "Sorry, I can't help you there, as I have no fruity computer or phone. I have not tested any apps, but I thought it would be possible to get the Pocket Query or GPX file on the Apple and copy the file via the microSD card to the GPSR, and the adapters on dx.com are cheap and dirty to do that." Well, they are cheap, and I kind of was happy to see that, so we'll include the link in the show notes for that adapter he sent us. But again, without having a jailbroken iPad, it will not allow you write access, and that's the same problem that we were running into on most of the Android devices, is you don't have write access without rooting the device with the OTG. That isn't the case for all of those devices, but unfortunately they're just not making it easy for us to use tablets and smartphones to load the GPSRs.
No, they're not. And to be clear, that 30-pin connector to SD card is only for the iPad. It won't work at all on the iPhone. So,
yeah. Now, we did have a Zoom It adapter that we talked about before that worked on the iPhone or the iPad. However, support for that seems to have vanished, including sales of new devices.
Right. I looked for it. I found it was 3 times the price of the camera connection kit. So I just couldn't do it, knowing that there will be no support for it.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
You can find an occasional one on eBay. So, on to the show for tonight. We are privileged to have 13hache from Oregon join us tonight on GeoGearHeads. Welcome aboard, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Honored to be on the show.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on because we did catch a couple of videos that one of the finders had posted on a couple of different caches that you had. And one of the things I found interesting was you really have some very high quality hides, but you don't have a whole lot of them. You only have 6 very high quality traditional cache hides. So that really seems to be different than most of what we see from hiders around here.
Well, what I do with my approach is that I come up with an idea, and I have to find exactly the right location to make it work. And that takes time.
Yeah, it does. And unfortunately out here we find that all of the good locations already have caches at them, and we can't place anything at good locations.
Right. So you try to find alternate sites, well, this should work site, and try to make it fit.
Indeed.
One has to be creative to make these work.
Now, to give folks a quick rundown on those 6 caches, you have one that has 61 favorite points, and that's Widowmaker. Then they go kind of down from there, but still very respectable quantities. Zero Xylem at 17 favorites, Skin Crawl at 14. There's Snake Eyes, there's W in Cross Section in Barn View. So not many caches, but all of them have favorite points, which is really an accomplishment.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we start by whichever one is your favorite, and we don't necessarily want to give the name so that we don't give too much in the way of spoilers. Give us some information about what that cache is and how you went about getting the inspiration to set it up.
Okay. This one is my favorite. It has been the most maintenance one that I had to do. It took a lot of work to get to it, to make it fit. It has a moving part to it. It has a very good surprise in it. It is what would term to be a water cache, where you fill a pipe up with water, and the clue says you need water to get the smiley, so of course you bring water. And when you get there, it's like, oh, this is a little bit different. There's a lot of decoration to the side. It's off the side of a road, pretty busy road, and it's like the vegetation off the side of the road that's never maintained. And so it has kind of a attribute, being kind of overgrown, a little spooky, that I said, this is what I want. This is going to work well for me. And so when you get to the site, it has all kinds of decorations. When you first get into it undercover, there's things to tickle you. And you go, what's this all about? And you look around, you go, okay, there's only one direction to go, but there's some of the little stick figures that were borrowed from the Blair Witch Project, trying to get the mood set here. And as you go forward into it, then you walk a little bit, and there's a branch you have to go underneath to continue. And in so doing, you look at the branch, and it's crowded with, shall we say, rodents and insects. So you're getting, it's like, okay, this is really, really creepy. Makes it fun. And then you go underneath that, and you see, as you enter, rise up after the branch, you're in a little different world. There's something all over the branches, and you get, okay, this is really getting creepy. So you look around with your water jug, and oh, there's a pipe ahead of you. And you go up to that, and when you investigate, you say, oh, part of an old fence line. There seems to be some barbed wire on it attached to a branch, kind of. The barbed wire doesn't have any points on it anymore. And, okay, well, this is a pipe. Let's go fill it up. And what I tried to do with this is that when you filled it up, you would be looking for something floating up to the top. Nothing shows up. What's going on? You pour more water in. Now you're getting water on your feet going, this is what's wrong. And the idea was that if you just kind of stand up or stood back a little bit to try to assess the situation, say, what's wrong? Oh, there it is. Now I get it. And at least one person has jumped back and has screamed. Really good. I love that.
Nice. I like those kind of hides myself.
Well, one thing I find notable in that description is that you tell people that they have to bring water. And even the person who had posted that video that caught my attention had not fully read the description and missed the water requirement. So it's a very good idea to read those requirements before you go out to find those caches.
Exactly. When I was setting it up in my backyard, trying to get this thing to work, it was interesting that because I'm using tubing to make this actually activate, you had to figure out how much water was going to go in. I couldn't see anybody bringing in 5 gallons of water, so I had to keep on reducing the size of everything to actually get down to 1 gallon. Most people seem to need more than 1 gallon. I think it's because they're focused on the float that doesn't appear. And no, 1 gallon will actually do it if you, of course, don't spill the water. And so if you're not quite paying attention, you could put the water in, and kind of walk away and go, well, so what? This is not working. You have to be attentive to what's going on around you.
Nice. Do you have many DNFs on that hide?
I think I have one or two. At the beginning of the, after it was activated, published, I had a little bit different type of situation where I wanted people to use their fingers to hold the water in on the pipe. That's when I had come across before, and I thought it was very effective. The problem was, when you did that, you never would ever see the activity, and it was hard to hold the water in. So there was the first couple of DNFs on it. They couldn't find it, or it was very difficult to work, so I had to re-engineer it.
Well, how much work really did go into this hide? And we're kind of at a disadvantage because we can't show this to the viewers, or especially to the listeners. But it is a very complex cache that involved obviously hiding a lot of moving bits and pieces. So I'd have to think this really took a lot of time, both on site and in the workshop.
Yes, it was. I guess my wife summed up says, "You must have a vision here, don't you?" I worked night after night on this thing, and that's true. Trying to get it to work was the first thing. A fill pipe is pretty obvious, but then when there's no bottom to it, as it were, it actually continues off to one side, and this part is hidden. And then it has to have an upright part which has a float in it. And so the water goes in, and you're moving the float upward as you're filling it with more water. So it's like in the shape of a letter U, the water course will have an equal level. So as you're filling the fill pipe up to the top, then the flow is at its maximum motion or movement. And that works through a string and two pulleys to the moving object, which hopefully, as you look at your right shoulder, there it is right at you. So it obviously is kind of a bug or a spider type of issue that is going to give you a really good surprise. Setting it up was coming up with a float that I could adjust the amount of weight to it to allow for the object that comes down. So I made it out of PVC pipe and glued the one in waterproof. The other end I used a plug so I could undo that and put in lead shot. And so I had to adjust that continuously until I got the right sweet spot. Then putting it up in a backyard, that worked just fine. But then when I went out to the real world, into under a tree that, of course, isn't lined up perfectly, I had to modify and modify again. So it took me probably 2 weeks in the field, in evenings or a day off, working and making this thing work. And then once I got the object to work through two pulleys, and with the string to the right length, then I had to camouflage the whole thing. So I have tubing underneath the ground, tubing that comes up vertically, and that is encased in bark and moss so that it's not obvious. And then it has to come across from this other leg of the U across to where you're standing, and that has to be camouflaged as well. So there are actually two pipes above ground that are camouflaged, plus the fill pipe. It took a bit of engineering to get this to be stable.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's a whole lot of effort to be putting into one traditional cache, and it certainly is worth the favorite points it's achieved. But it's only been out for a few months, really. You're not even looking at a full year on it.
Exactly. Word of mouth is getting around. People are saying, "Oh yeah, well, a friend of mine said," or "This geocacher so-and-so said I should go visit this one." And I love some of the logs that people are putting in. It is so much fun to listen to read the logs. It's like what I had envisioned to work is actually coming through after the first stumble.
Nice. I'm looking at the log page, and as of this recording, there are 18 finds and 14 favorite points, which, wow, that's an incredible ratio right there. The last log in there says we had to come back for a second try. You tricked us the first time.
I think it must be that they're not looking in the right place as they're filling. I had the way I had originally tried to set it up is that the surprise object, would actually tap you on the shoulder.
Oh, okay.
So that would have been really a good surprise, but then it's going to be scary to certain people. This is not it's a creepy sensation. So since part of it was mental, I didn't want anybody to swing around and hurt themselves on the object, so I pushed it away a bit from their head, from their shoulder, so you have to kind of look. When there's a second person there, and they're looking and looking, and nothing's happening, and then they look up a little bit, you can stop pouring the water now, then the fun begins.
Now, how much have you had to modify this cache to adjust for things that might not be holding up under the weather?
Well, when the cache is full of water and the object has moved as much as it's going to, and then it has to move back up. So I put drainage holes in the lower pipes to drain the water out, so then the object retreats back up to where its hiding place is. It froze one season last year. And so I had to, that was a DNF on that, so I had to check that out, and sure enough, it completely froze solid. So I had to wait till the cold snap was over, and then I had to go back and where the drainage part was, the holes in the line, I had to excavate and put down a plastic bucket so that it would have free flow of water, of all the water that was in it, so it would drain out and be dry. So I think I fixed Jack Frost there, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to wait till next season, next winter.
Well, at least you have hopefully another year before you'll have to really worry about that one. But this one really does sound like it was inspired by the location that you found to place this cache.
Partially so. The first pipe water cache I came across, it was like, here comes this float coming up. And I said, this is really cool. This is a really great idea. And I thought, well, how can I make this work more? What can I do with this? This is really great. There's something I can do with this. And I came across my own ideas in the past was when we would set up for Halloween at a front door in a suburban house, when you open the door for the trick-or-treaters when they ring the doorbell, the door slowly opened, objects would move behind the bushes and from the eaves of the house back and forth because they'd be tied to black strings to the door. So when the door moved, these objects would move, giving the kids a thrill. So I said, why don't I just put the two together? And so that when the water moves the float moves the string. Aha, I can make this work. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of choosing an object that would have a pretty good universal fear, that it does, and the logs tell a story. It's working, it's scary, and it's fun.
Nice, nice.
Now you also have another one that had a Google video posted on it that caught our attention that wasn't anywhere near as complex, but is also very inventive. Can you kind of give a description of that without giving too much away?
Sure. That one was an old object of a fuse box, and I had this laying around. It's all rusty and decrepit looking, and I said, you know, this thing is not completely destroyed. I can possibly use this. And so since I do use nanos as part of my caches, I can put a nano in this way and make it not impossible to find, but difficult to find. And so I got this fuse box, and I had to modify a little bit of it because I had the holes punched in it for putting electrical wires in. So I had to go ahead and cover those up and spray paint a rust color on it. And then I had this old wires that I had from my remodeling of my house, and so I could attach those inside the fuse box like a normal fuse box would be wired up, the wires coming out, and I attached it to a side of an old fruit stand that's been abandoned. And so I had these wires coming out, and they're cut off, and it's obvious that they're cut off, so there's no real fear of there's electricity in there, and there's a telephone pole nearby, so I made the connection, or people can make the connection that, oh, this used to be connected up, but it isn't anymore. So it really is defunct, but it's like it's part of a building. And so you're looking around for this nano, and this is, you finally focus on it and say, well, there's nothing else here. This must be where it's at. And so you open it up, and it's like, well, it's a magnetic nano. It should be attached to the metal box, but I don't see anything. And so you're staring at it, and the title of it gives you the clue. And if you're right-handed, you check out one thing with the cache, and nothing there. Most people are right-handed, so of course I put it on the left. That makes it a little bit harder to find.
Yes, it does. Well, I'm left-handed, so immediately I reach out with the left hand. But I realize most people are right-handed.
Right. So I went with the odds in that one.
Now, you did mention one thing in there that I found very intriguing, because I'm always afraid of doing the electrical caches because it might encourage cachers to be a little bit reckless with electric equipment if they don't know what they're doing. So you did mention that you made it kind of obvious that it isn't connected to any power source. So that kind of answers that question.
Yes, I thought it would be, people would say, well, I don't know if I want to do this or not because, yeah, it's electrical. But no, the wires are there. They're hanging out. They're obviously cut. They're old. The box is old. Shouldn't be any problem.
Yeah, no, I do have to probably say that I really don't encourage people to try too much to play with the electrical equipment if they don't really know what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
And it is also, as a hider, it does make a big difference to pay attention to where you're doing these electrical caches, because there have been recently a lot of thefts of the materials out of transformer boxes and things like that, so the cops have gotten pretty sensitive to that in certain areas. So you probably want to avoid putting caches on or around transformers because your finders, if spotted, will be questioned.
That's true.
And this is nowhere near that kind of stuff, so it's well out of range for most of those thieves.
Yeah, being that it's so rusty and the wires being obviously decrepit, I thought that would be a good safe clue.
Now you have another one that really has picked up a number of favorite points that you were talking about before the show. That was a favorite and really seems like it might be a lot easier to approach for someone who hasn't had the experience with the mechanical engineering behind something like that first one.
Okay, so you mean the one we're talking about right now?
No, I'm. This one is pretty simple too, but I'm thinking more the one that you were describing to us earlier, which is basically a good camo job on a PVC pipe.
That's correct. Okay, that one. The favorites on that were boosted because nearby in McMinnville there was a GPS maze exhibit at the Evergreen Air Museum, and so that brought in a lot more people that would normally just be cruising by or be locals. So the numbers were a little bit inflated in that sense, but I'm happy with that. I'm glad they had a good time. That one is ADS plastic. It's a black plastic drain pipe. And I chose the size of it that would take in a pickle jar. And then I had to locate a spot where if I'm going to camouflage this, I'm going to have to make it a little bit different. Having come across a camouflage log several times, I thought, I think there's something else one can do to make this a little bit less obvious. And so one of the things I thought was size. Instead of having it just be a small piece of wood laying on the ground, I decided to make it larger. Now it's not quite so obvious. And this one, what I chose to do was I covered it with bark, and I chose the same type of bark as the tree that it's going to be attached to. And then when I made it longer than just a stick, it actually branches out. And in so doing, the angle of the branches and how the curves of the cache, they represent the same branches in the same tree. So it doesn't stand out very much. And then when I camouflaged it, I had the fun and games of trying to learn how do you attach bark to plastic in the weather. So I wound up using polyethylene glue. And doing that, I had a learning curve on how much pressure to put on, how much glue to put on, and you wind up using like wire, masking tape, or radiator clamps to hold the bark that has been glued to the plastic so it would adhere. And it adheres rather well, but not perfectly. There is maintenance I have to do. Every once in a while, a piece will come loose, and people say, "Oh, I can see the cache behind the camouflage." So, okay, take it down, take it back to the shop, and put it back together. But it works pretty good. It's a nice job of bark covering it. I also added what would be the moss and lichens that are found on the trees nearby. I added those onto it by various methods. Spacing of the moss and lichen, so it represents very closely what the trees are nearby. So that when people come to it, they're looking around on the ground usually, unless they've read the hints, and then they're finding it and going, okay, I never guessed that would be the cache.
Nice. It sounds almost more like art than engineering.
I think it's a combination, yes. When you're gathering the bark material for this, you choose the right type of bark for the same type of tree. Where do you get this bark? Well, I happen to have a wood stove, so I went to my firewood pile and said, oh, yes, I do have some of this wood. Okay, I'll go and take the bark off it. There's another learning curve because you don't want to break off the smaller pieces, so you kind of have to get it wet and damp, and immersing it in warm water helps a little bit on that. Then when you get the pieces off, you have to clean the underside because the insects have been there making it into a powder, and that, of course, won't glue very well. Another learning curve, so you have to clean that off. And then the fun part about it is when you get the pieces of bark, you soak them in hot water, so now they're softer. And then you can squeeze them or train them to fit onto the pipe itself. Is that the pipe has different diameters depending on what part of the pipe it is. Since it is representing a branch, it does taper. You have to get the pieces to fit just so. And so you wind up putting on a few pieces on at one time, and then you come back a day or so later when everything's set, and then you're going to patch in the other pieces of bark to it. So after they've been cleaned and treated in hot water, you take them out, and then with a knife and a file, wood rasp, you shape them to fit the pieces that are already there. And of course, you're matching up the color of the bark, and you're tapering the ends of the bark that you're going to match with the pieces so that they fit the radius of the curve of the pipe, because the pipe, the larger diameter, has less radius than a smaller one. So you learn by trial and error that what really looks good. So you're matching up the pieces as best you can. And of course, you can't do it perfectly, and so that's where the moss and lichen come in. They cover up a lot of errors, I can tell you.
So I have to ask, because most of the adhesives that people have tried, give them some kind of problems. What have you found that really seems to work well in these rougher environments to hold on these unusual materials? I
like to use the polyurethane glue. It's nice because I can put the glue on, for example, on the bark, which is rough and surface, but then I only have to get the plastic pipe damp with spraying water or using a sponge. Then it's a matter of getting it on there, set in place exactly right, and then get the squeeze on it. So I use like a radiator hose clamp. That works pretty good, or I use wire, and sometimes I can get by with just using masking tape if the bark is a little bit thinner. Any kind of hole or crack or the joints between the pieces of bark, the polyurethane glue will foam out. And then you go after that when it's set with a knife, and you slowly pick that out as best you can. And then when you get the whole thing pretty much covered, you stand back and you say, well, look at all these joints, they're not quite matched, and this, and so you get camouflage spray paint, and you very carefully spray just a little bit here, a little bit there. I find by holding the spray can maybe about 18 inches apart and a little short burst, I can get it so that it looks like not a sloppy paint job, but it looks like, well, it's just a different coloration of the bark.
Very interesting.
Right.
And you use that same glue then for fastening on the lichens and stuff?
Yes, I tried doing that, and unfortunately the glue will foam through the moss or lichens a bit. So, well, that's kind of makes it harder to do, because how do you paint the glue green when it's on moss? That's kind of hard. So I went up using staples. Well, I looked one look at that and I went, nope, the staples are shiny. So pull that out, take out the staples, spray paint them flat black or a camouflage brown. Then that's dry, put it back in a staple gun and use those staples. Ah, you can't see that.
That is ingenious.
Details, details, the devil is in the details.
Without a doubt. And that's why you have so many favorite points.
It looks good. People really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone were to try to make one of these great camo hides, you know, you've given them a lot of great tips, but is there something that you really can give them to watch out for to reduce the amount of maintenance that would be required?
Smaller caches, of course, would be less work. That would be a thing. If you get the bark that would come in bigger chunks, so you're covering a greater amount of it, that would be a good job. Part of the problem I found was when you're putting the pieces of pipe together, you have couplings, and the diameter of a coupling is greater than the diameter of the pipe itself. And so trying to glue across this 1/8 of an inch elevation difference has been difficult. So I've been using different materials to try to fill in the space so that the glue attaches to all the surface of the bark, not just one point here or the high points there. Now I'm using cork, gluing the cork on there in a ring just underneath, adjacent to a coupling, and raising the thickness of that. And so I can make a kind of a tapering or a gradual elevation change. This gives much more adherence to the glue and the bark. So when I have replaced pieces of the bark, I've been adding this cork to it, just cork sheeting. And the pressure you're holding it onto is really important, because it squeezes the glue into all pieces of the bark and to all the surface of the plastic pipe, or in this case, sometimes onto the cork. So I'm using radiator hose clamps that are maybe about 10 inches, 12 inches long, and using a drill and a driver and screwing them on, not by hand, but with a machine, the drill. And it works a lot faster because the glue, of course, wants to sit. And you do want to use disposable gloves when using the polyurethane, because once it gets on your fingers, it's there until it wears off. Right. But yeah, you get the clamp screw in there really good and tight, and then of course you leave it overnight, over 24 hours. Then when the clamp band comes off, then you have to go and work on all the glue that has escaped through the holes in the bark. As far as making it less maintenance, possibly one could put some type of a sealer on it that keeps the moisture out but is not glossy. It would have to dry a real flat finish. I have not tried that yet.
Interesting thoughts, and a great safety tip with the gloves.
Oh, yes.
Have you found that people kind of abuse these caches because of the camo, that they're not realizing it's a cache or can't figure out how to access them?
Yes, that has happened. The main thing is, since one part of the cache unscrews, that's always a weak point that's pretty visible. That kind of gives the cache away. Otherwise, maybe it wouldn't be found as much. Is that when they're screwed back on, they'll cross-thread them. Mm-hmm. They're not careful on how it works. And then the next person comes along. If they're not strong, they have a hard time getting it undone. So I had to go down sometimes and just go ahead and check the cache out and say, oh, nope, got to go and redo the threads a little bit with a file and get it going again. Other than that, one of my other caches, the cache owner had his two boys there, and they were tossing the cache back and forth with him, not knowing what it was, and he was looking in the wrong place.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He said, "Oh, no damage to it. It's okay." The other thing I have an issue with is when you have the cache on the ground and it freezes and they pick it up, the bark may come off. Oops.
Yeah, for a good reason to probably keep the cache off the ground, for maintenance reasons, and also to probably just make it a little bit easier for people to find.
One of my main thoughts when I first did the camouflage pipe was, what if somebody come along looking for firewood scraps and I'm just going to pick this thing up and take it home? So I might lose it that way.
Oh, nice. Good point.
So how often do you spend, or how often do you go out and check these, do your maintenance runs on these high-quality caches that are so intricate?
First one whenever I get a DNF for a reason that they could not find it, I better make sure it's there, because like I said, maybe somebody took it for firewood. I want to make sure it's still there, of course. And otherwise, it's when some of the bark is showing, then the bark is removed, then they can tell me that I saw the cache, a little bit of the cache itself, it gave it away, and then I have to go and repair that. That's maybe about every 3 or 4 months.
That's pretty good, really.
Yeah, that is.
And you do end up requiring, or I shouldn't say requiring, but relying on the finders to do some of that spot checking for you.
Yeah, the reporting for me. That's very important. I really do appreciate that. I want the next person's experience to be as best as possible.
Yeah, excellent. And we've only touched on 3 of these caches, some excellent hides, and hopefully people have picked up some really good tips for hiding some great caches of their own. But you do have 6 really good caches, and we'll link to each of those in the show notes. So hopefully you'll get some more finders, and if anyone has found these caches, maybe they want to call or write in and let us know what you thought of them, and what made these caches so memorable to you.
Well, I hope they do. That's really interesting, is getting all the logs that explain how they had fun finding it, or they were surprised how it was and how it blended in with the environment.
Excellent. Thank you very much again for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. It's
been a great honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was that's amazing to me, that effort he puts into a cache, that it's going to blend in with the environment, make it that much more memorable for the finder.
Yeah, and now, Bad Cop, that's not that far from you. You could probably make a special trip to hit a couple of those.
It's 2 hours south. So,
yeah, good weekend trip.
Exactly.
Or, yeah.
It can be a day trip.
There you go. I'll look forward to that.
Okay. I'll bring a video back just for you, Daryl. I'm not going to post it on the internet, though.
Yeah, good idea, because you don't want to give any spoilers or anything.
No.
Now, before we go, we did have a comment from Minnesota Boy via the Google Plus Hangout on there, and another good reason to hit Google Plus and follow us there. And he said that he has some feedback from last week's episode about tethering with the iPhone. He has the iPhone 5 and was looking to tether to an iPad. He has the unlimited data plan and was grandfathered into that, and AT&T does not allow tethering on that plan. You have to switch to the 5 gig data plan to have tethering with AT&T, which costs $50 a month for the data, and he's not going to be looking to do that for now, but thanks us for the feedback and talking about it last week. Now, that's also the same plan that I have, and one of the reasons I haven't done that. So I keep looking at other options and end up using quite frequently the iPad's LTE, or if you don't have the LTE versions, you can use the 3G version. Mm-hmm. But Verizon here in the U.S. does have on a $30 a month plan that is month to month. You don't have to sign a contract and keep that. 2 gigs of data and does allow for the tethering. So that works really well, except I don't like taking the big 10-inch tablet with me everywhere. Well,
yeah. There are pros and cons to that, however. Now, also on the Google Plus Hangout tonight, Team Buxton chimed in and said that he bought GeoSphere after listening to last week's show. So, just for him, I mean, the only reason we're doing this next show is just for him. We're talking about Geosphere 3. And then the following week, we're talking about scuba caching. So there's a couple of good topics for your tech questions. After that, we're talking about geocaching streaks. That's the number of geocaches that you found one a day after another. And that's a good chance for you to share your stories. So send those in. You can send it in feedback on this or any of the shows by phone, email, social media, however you choose.
And you can check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the Cachemaniacs and the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider making a PayPal donation through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Offenauer and Daryl Wandenberg. This show is copyright 2013 by Daryl Wandenberg, all rights reserved.
Cash with the Cachemaniacs.